Welcome back to another episode of War in Cali. In this episode, I'm going to talk about Venice 13. After the 405 freeway tore through predominantly Mexican American and immigrant communities in the late 1950s, many migrated west into the Oakwood area of Venice Beach. Originally, the Oakwood area was labeled as a serving zone, and Venice had been notoriously known as the ghetto by the sea, due to the City of Los Angeles' attitude towards the area. City of Los Angeles' neglect towards Oakwood, it created cheap housing prices. This attracted many black and Mexican working class communities. With many Mexicans coming to the area, this would later lead to Venice 13 gang being formed and becoming one of the earliest gangs in the city. Throughout the 1960s, the gang grew rapidly. The city became overrun with drugs and a lot of violence going on, and Venice 13 was one of the gangs causing it. With trying to run the drug trade and run the city, this will lead to a lot of tension and also racial tension. In the 1990s, Oakwood exploded when a war broke out between the Venice 13, the Venice Shoreline Crips, and the Culver City 13. One of Venice 13's deadliest wars has been with the Venice Shoreline Crips, who they share the same neighborhood with in Oakwood. Shorelines and Venice 13 didn't beef at first. They grew up in the same community, so they grew up as friends at first. Once they became enemies, this became one of the most deadliest wars in Venice ever. This will lead to up to 50 people being shot and even killed, from gang members to innocent bystanders. But of now, the Shorelines and Venice 13 have ceased fire. But Venice 13 also beefs with a lot of other gangs, like Santa Monica 13, 18th Street, the Graveyard Gangsta Crips, and Culver City 13, who they have been beefing with for several decades. Venice 13 is made up of several cliques, being cliques like the Dukes, the Little Jokers, the G's, the Malos, the Little Locos. Now their rival, Culver City 13, was established over 5 decades ago. The Culver City 13s became known in the Mar Vista Garden Housing Project, and this became their headquarters. Despite being Serranos, which are known to wear blue, the Culver Cities identify with wearing red. The Culver Cities become one of the most deadliest gangs in the area and develop rivalries with several gangs, like Santa Monica 13, Venice 13, and the Venice Shoreline Crips, among many others. But with that being said, let's get into some cases. Gilbert from Venice 13's nephew Robert, who was also from that gang, would be killed by Culver City 13. Several Culver City members will go on trial for the murder of Robert, but all will be acquitted. Gilbert then, months later, decided to take things in his own hands. Culver City 13 members Anthony and Manuel were walking near the Mar Vista Gardens Recreation Center when Gilbert pulled up in a car and jumped out and started shooting at them both. Both men managed to get away unharmed. Shortly after that, David, Raj, and Javier were drinking outside Mar Vista Apartments when Gilbert approached them with a gun in his hand. Gilbert yelled out, "That's what you punks get," as he fired multiple shots. Raj and Javier were shot multiple times, and David would be shot and killed. Multiple days after the shooting, Gilbert was picked out as the shooter by Anthony and Manuel, as what this led to him being arrested. Gilbert would later receive life for the shootings. Gary and Linton from Venice 13 would go to a pool hall to play pool. Inside the pool hall, they would run into a man named Jose. They thought he was from a rival gang. They told him to come outside, but this would be a bad decision for him. Once outside, Gary and Linton would jump Jose, and they would both end up stabbing him several times before they both fled. Jose would survive the altercation, and Jose would later identify both men. Gary would receive 13 years, and Linton would receive 6. John was a loved member of the Culver City 13. He was shot dead on 1:30 a.m. on November 11, 2001. In hours, Culver City 13 would get revenge. They shot and killed a Santa Monica 13 member. An hour after that, a Culver City 13 man would shoot another man, leading to him being paralyzed. Culver City was going after any gang or a person they thought who can be involved in John's death. Next day, a known Venice 13 member named Andrew was shot and killed by Culver City. Andrew's shooters were later identified by several witnesses, and it turned out to be a Culver City member named So. So would later receive 62 years to life for the shooting. Leo was driving with his homie Sergio in the passenger seat. They were both from Culver City 13. They pulled up next to a parked car, which had 2 men inside of it named Victor and Jose, and their friend Juan, who was on the outside of the car. Sergio would ask them where they was from. Before they could respond, Sergio fired over 15 shots. Victor and Jose died at the scene. Juan was the only survivor. The shooting was strictly about the Culver City catching a Venice 13, since they was in their turf. Following the police call, Leo and Sergio were both arrested. Eyewitnesses were later taken to the site of their arrest and identified both men and their car as being involved in the shooting. Both Leo and Sergio both received life sentences. In the late afternoon on October 25th, 2008, Christina drove her car to the Mar Vista housing projects, where she picked up her boyfriend Mar and his friends David and Miguel. They were from Culver City 13. They would tell Christina to drive to a liquor store, which she did. Once they arrived, they would run into two brothers, Edgar and Gil. They believed them to be from Venice 13. David and Miguel jumped out the car and asked them where was they from. Before they could say anything, they just started firing at them, shooting Edgar and Gil multiple times. Shooting would leave Gil dead. Edgar would later identify both men as the shooters, and this would lead to them being picked out. Christina would later be questioned as she was the driver, and this would lead to her snitching and telling everything that happened. Christina would tell the police that David and Miguel were from Culver City 13, and they did the shooting thinking they were shooting at enemies. David would later receive 75 years to life for the shooting, and Miguel received 50 years to life. Isaiah lived in an area claimed by the Santa Monica 13, which he was a member of. Santa Monica 13 and Venice 13 been beefing for a while. On September 30th, 2009, Isaiah was riding his bike near his home in Santa Monica when two men pulled up and one got out of a car with a gun and fired multiple shots in Isaiah's direction. Isaiah would be shot in the leg, and a stray bullet hit a man named Jose. The car sped away, but police got behind him and they took the police on a high-speed chase, with two Venice 13 members, Doug and Salvador, will be responsible for the shooting. This shooting got both Doug and Salvador 40 years to life. Cyrus worked at Cadillac Hotel in Venice. A lot of people were hanging out in front of the hotel, and this made Cyrus irritated. His acquaintance Francisco offered to make them leave. Francisco pointed the gun at a man named Brian, who was sleeping near the hotel, and threatened to kill him if he didn't leave. Cisco was yelling at everybody and letting them know he was from Venice 13, and this was his neighborhood. Brian by this time was standing with a group of people when Francisco pointed the gun at him and fired 4 shots, hitting Brian one time in the leg. Jason, who was at the scene, he started yelling at Francisco. Francisco took this as disrespect and pulled out his gun and moved toward Jason. He fired 4 times at Jason and killed him. The whole shooting would be captured on tape. Francisco would later be convicted after several witnesses came forth. This got Francisco 40 years to life. Several Venice 13 members, including Richard and Vincent, would go to a strip club. Richard was an OG and shot caller at a Venice 13. Vincent and Richard would get into an argument, with Vincent being disrespectful, and he challenged Richard to do something to him. Richard pulled out a gun and shot Vincent in the chest, killing him. Richard would later be arrested several months later, and he later received a life sentence for the shooting. On January 28, 2016, Mario and his girlfriend Lori were walking when an SUV stopped between them. The SUV had 2 people inside of it, and the passenger got out the car and approached Mario. He asked Mario where he was from, and before he said anything, he told Mario he was from Culver City 13. He then proceeded to fire multiple shots at Mario. Responding police officers found Mario unresponsive on the ground, and he died from headshots. The shooter was later determined to be Aaron from Culver City 13, and he received 50 years to life. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.